Hello.
I mean, this can stretch. As long as the HDMI can make it, it should be good.
Sorry. You know, it's the balance. Like, you gotta have those the germs too.
Right.
Can you just flip it so that you can sit here?
Let's go here. It's cold outside. You know what's cold? If I'm saying it's cold outside. It's cold outside. Definitely breezy outside. I feel like snowflakes out there.
I'm good.
All right, it's 9:30, so I think everybody's here, it seems like, so we can get started. This is a finance committee meeting, but we're going to talk about water billing, and particular high water billing. I would just introduce the councilors. We have Councilor Driscoll, Councilor Green, Councilor Allen, Councilor Bay, Councilor Rudd. We have Corey Driscoll Dunham, and we have Commissioner Awald from the Water Department. And I would just say the jump off for all this is that for a single family home that I own, I got a water bill for one quarter that was $1,016 or something like that. And it caused me to ask a number of questions about how normal this is, because when I thought it was not normal, it seemed that most people involved thought it was pretty normal and that it happened quite often. And that seemed problematic, especially in a city, well, or any place. The $1,000 water bill seems problematic, but even more so when a lot of people in the community don't have $1,000 laying around. So how can we warn? I don't have $1,000 laying around. It's just $1,000 on a credit card that stays for longer, right? So, anyways, I asked a bunch of questions, and it looks like you want to give some kind of presentation to start, or
yeah, I think that might, kind of lead things off. Then we can focus our discussion on areas that we would like to narrow in on.
Okay.
So, all right. So this is regarding the water billing and reading that we do at the water department. So this is a very important topic. It applies to certain people. When their water bill comes in a quarter, sometimes people are shocked by the bill, not knowing what happened, what's going on. This isn't something new to just us. It's a problem across the country because of the aging infrastructure and all that. But as we're looking at our city and what we do and who we bill, it seems to be a small percentage of customers. We looked at over the last 2 years, I think there's about 50 customers impacted, and we have 34,000 plus water accounts. So despite that, the percentage is pretty low compared to our system as a whole. But it can be a challenging bill to pay.
So you're saying over the last 2 years, you're 50 customers, 50 accounts that had bills over $1,000 in a quarter?
Approximately.
These are single-family units?
Correct. We just looked at single-family residential units. So some people may ask, well, how do these high bills occur? A lot of times it's broken or frozen pipes after the meter, because nothing registers in the meter unless it's past the meter. So it's already, into the house, and somewhere there's a leak inside the house. Either it's a broken frozen pipe from the winter because the basements aren't insulated or weatherized.
Commissioner, sorry, can you just move the mic a little closer?
Sure. Just don't want it to be sticking up my nose, sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, broken frozen pipes happen frequently in the city because basements aren't weatherized for cold conditions. Sometimes we'll find basement doors that are open, like the storm doors. They're just open, and underneath the house it's same air temperature as outside. A lot of times when we get these high consumption notices and we send them out to the property owners, we don't get much response back from them. We'll send a letter out, we won't hear anything. We'll send another letter out, nothing. So it's we can't do anything unless we can get in there. We notify them as best we can. the majority of things that we find when we do get into the houses and talk to the homeowners is that there is a leaking toilet. Either the seal is bad, or the float in the back of the tank is set just a little too high, so it always is overflowing just a little bit. Faucets leaking, joints on the pipe leaking. That stuff over time will increase your water bill. Sometimes people fill their pools. Like, I'll just hook it up to my hose bib and fill it up. And then they don't realize they're going to get a massive water bill. Sometimes there's issues where property is vacant or the homeowner is deceased and the bills are going to a relative and they don't know what these bills are really for and they just kind of set them to the side, but yet there's a leak inside that property. So those bills and notices go unanswered. And very infrequently there could be a computer error. And those, when we do find them, we adjust them and make corrections as necessary. So here's a chart showing just roughly, I got a handout here for you as well. It's a little tough to see on the screen, but how big of a leak or how small of a leak and how much that can impact what your bill could be. Now these are in millimeters. I have the English conversion, but
So what's the cost? Like if you were to have dollars overlaid on this chart, how is it related?
So breaking down that cost, because of the different tiers we have in our billing system, then your base rate, so these are all in gallons, so I've got to convert it to cubic feet because we bill everything in cubic feet. And I'll have that breakdown probably by the end of today. But looking at it, if you had what would be classified as a 4 millimeter leak, I think it is, which is a tubing diameter of 7/32. You think of that little plastic tube in the back of your toilet tank is 1/8. So it's just slightly bigger than that. Over a 3-month period, you're going to get billed over $1,000 because of that leak. So if your toilet is running just a little bit where it's always constantly filling, that 1/8 tube is going to run you almost $600-800 over the course of a quarter. Just that alone. So you compound that with any other leaking faucets or water use that your typical water use that you don't include that, you're going to get a high water bill pretty quick. So looking at what options are out there is, what might we look at in the future. A lot of different water utilities have different programs out there. They typically call them something like a leak forgiveness or impact program. So owner has to meet certain criteria that they set out and deem adequate. Like it's a single family homeowner, not rentals, not commercial, not industrial. No one has ever really forgiven the full bill. That's usually a portion of it, a percentage of it, or maybe possibly a different rate. Like instead of a commercial rate, maybe there's a wholesale rate that you would be charged for the total water used, so it would lower your bill. Typically it's a one-time deal, so you can't come back here every month and the municipalities say, all right, hey, I got another high water bill, what can you do for me? It's a one-time life of the property type of thing, so you get one shot at it. And when these occur, it's loss of revenue for the departments that they can invest into their infrastructure. So any of these types of programs would require council participation and action to create something like this. But currently we don't have anything like this.
Excuse me. I left my glasses at home. I can't see any of that. So would you be able to share that with us?
Certainly. I can send this over at the end.
Okay.
And can I interrupt the question as well? How do you and how does the administration feel about adopting something like that?
I mean, it's something we'd have to look at because the impacts can be huge on operations. Depending on how it's set up, who it involves, and all the other stuff, it have to take some legwork to look at the details and see the impacts. So some of the other things that I think were discussed in our email was, more frequent readings and how do we do that? What are the impacts to the system and operations? So basically, at this point in time, our system has transferred over to about 95% of the meters are either what we call walk-by reads or touchpad reads. So there's a just a little pad on the outside of the house where you'd have to come and touch the pad to get the digital reading from the basement. We still have multiple properties that have a physical read. You have to get into the basement to read it, or there's a digital display on the outside of the house that you have to physically read and punch into our meter reading handguns.
When you say multiple, you said 95% are walk-by or touch, so 5% are probably the old. So is
Yes.
it 5% of 30,000, or is it 5% of a different number?
Yeah, it's 5% of the 34,000 accounts. If we were to install new meters citywide, if we could get access to all the meters, which is some of the issue that we have, is we can't get access to meters to change them out. To be something of a Wi-Fi type of read, so it's an automatic read, like a drive-by, so you wouldn't have to walk the beat. You could just drive by, or even, internet-based. You're looking at between $7 to $10 million to swap out all the meters in the city, and that's to the current technology right now. Doing this, it's a long-term process. So as things evolve, new technology is going to advance. So do you then start going with the newer ones? So it's a revolving operations cost.
I'm sorry, can you, just for some perspective, can you refresh me on how many people we have doing the meter reading?
We have 3 meter readers right now.
Okay.
So, and to do this, we would need new software. Currently, all the billing is done through the AS400 software. So we would need new billing software, new Wi-Fi software that would communicate with the meters, and maybe new billing software. And so there has some IT implications as well. So doing monthly billing, obviously the customer would get a more timely notification of what their bill might be. They may be able to detect a leak that they have inside their property sooner, but then they'd have to be constantly checking, and their responsibility to look at their account if they logged in on a monthly basis. All right, what's going on with my account? Am I seeing a high read? Some of the additional costs besides just the meters itself, if we were to send out monthly bills, the increase in postage could be up to $200,000 because we're doing that many more mailings. Not to mention additional staff to be doing the readings, new routes, and more staff to answer more frequent billing inquiries and processing payments, and also printing costs. Those that we haven't even determined yet what the impact is. Some of the things we can also look at is mutual collaboration with the property owners. Getting access to some of these properties that we can't get access to right now because they either just don't show up when we set an appointment, or they don't allow us access. We can't get in and swap those meters out or take a look at them and see if they have an issue.
Why do you think people don't let you in to replace the
That
meters?
is a good question. I don't know.
Is it because their bills are very low from their old meter and they don't want the bill to go
It
up?
could be. It could be that they're stealing water and they don't want us in there to see it, which we've found on numerous occasions. Somebody has pulled the meter out and straight piped it. So theft of services happens, we've seen that numerous times. Homeowner can install a meter or some kind of a Wi-Fi device on their pipe after the meter, so they could get an internal read on their phone or whatever. Probably something similar to all the technology that they have for thermostats in the house. You could get information on your phone. You would know what's going on. You might be able to trend a leak if you have one. Our water finance department is a good resource for people. If they have questions on the billing, they can call. We can look. We can see what kind of trends you're seeing. If you're seeing an increase, if you're not, we might be able to help you troubleshoot. Look at this. Look at your toilet. Look at your faucets. These are the first major offenders of a leak that we tend to find. And also, we can look at education. Now, there's numerous education programs out there that we can kind of piggyback on through American Water Works Association that could involve grade school kids, helping them in their own house to identify leaks maybe their parents don't know. Because you could start doing, there's a lot of different brochures and packets out there you can have the kids do a little field trip, give them a little bit of education, and then they might be able to take this information home, and because maybe the property owner doesn't understand that a leaky toilet is going to impact their water bill. So you can start from the ground up, I guess, with education on what to look for water leaks. And that's about all I have to share with you. So if you have any questions or more focused.
There are definitely questions. I would just say on the 50 out of 34,000 sounds very little. Like it's less than, it's almost 0.1%. It's like very little. So, but that seems different than sort of the like maybe it's because the employees are seeing all 50 accounts over the 2-year period, so they're thinking it's normal. But I would have, if you made me guess based on the way people like reacted when I presented it, I would say it happened like 1,000 times across the city or something.
I think people get high con bills. I don't know if it's to that magnitude.
So like where the usage goes up like 2 to 3 times, and the bill will go from 70 to 250, but not to 1,000.
I mean, the average water bill in the city, based on our water rate study we did last year, the average homeowner pay is $300 a year. So you break that over 12 months. Maybe somebody saw a spike one month that was higher than their normal, but maybe didn't reach that $1,000 threshold.
So they would have received a letter from us saying
They
your
still would,
usage is
yes.
higher than normal, but it doesn't necessarily meet the $1,000 threshold. That we
That
looked at.
$1,000 threshold was kind of a number set to kind of take a look at the system as a whole. A lot of people get a high con letter.
Do you know how many high con, I don't know what con is, but high
High consumption
consumption
letters,
how
yeah.
many high consumption warnings
How many
do you
high
send?
consumption letters we put out a year? Yes, we have that.
Last year, we sent out
You gotta come to the microphone.
6,700.
6,700 letters for high consumption over the course of the year,
January to December.
from January to December.
The only I don't know how the timing of high consumption letters works most of the time, but for mine, I got it, I don't know, August 22nd or something, and the period had ended August 12th. Mm-hmm. So it was basically like, hey, warning, you're going to get a really high bill, but it's too late to fix it now. So,
It's already happened.
yeah.
And then there's a process where we have to download the edit sheets. We're constantly billing each week. So
Sorry, can you just come up to the
Yeah,
mic?
maybe.
And introduce yourself, Daniel.
I'm Diane Desarmo,
There you go.
billing supervisor. So each week we are reading and we're billing a cycle, and it has to do with the certain territories we're in. So your particular account, we read it August 12th. Then that information is not, the final edit's not printed maybe for 2 to 3 weeks after that. At that time, we're auditing those sheets, and that's when the letter was generated on August 22nd and mailed out to you. And then the bill date, of course, was September 9th. So there is a lag in notification, but it's that final edit printing that alerts us to the high consumption. We don't see it on the meter reader side right off, where we can do anything about it.
Is there other data that you have that says like, oh, you had a leak X number of days out of the last 30? How is
The new
that?
equipment, they're called the e-coders, they will, we read every 3 months, and it will capture the last 35 days of history. It doesn't capture the entire, so we can't say the leak happened the first part of the quarter or the last part of the quarter.
Because it only captures 35 days.
It
from
only
the-
captures the last 35 days from the day of the
So in
reading.
theory, if your leak happened the first 2 months and the last month it was fixed, the data that you have might not show the leak.
Right, it may show 3 to 7 days a leak, and maybe the leak happened the first month out of the quarter.
Okay. Thank you. I have other questions, but we can all. Councilor Bay, you have questions?
Yeah. Myself and former Senator Valesky used to do these home energy savings workshops, and we learned a lot about water costs. There's many people there who didn't know there was 2 charges every time you turn your faucet on, or, me with the running toilets and what that means. So, but obviously there's a lot of things we don't know. I had a couple of questions. What about, has there ever been an issue, or is there a charge that comes on your bill? Has there ever been an issue for maybe where pipes run underground? Because obviously homeowners, there's no way for them to know that there's a leak just underground, and whatever the amount of leakage is, they don't, they may never know why their bill is high, and they may take every precaution in the house, and obviously that's not anybody's fault, but I'm wondering if you ever run into those kind of issues.
So a leak underground, you're saying like on the service line?
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't be billed for that cost because your meter's in the house. So that leak in the yard is never going to make it to the meter.
Well, I'm sorry, let me clarify. Where it just goes underground in the basement, for example, like where,
So you got
just under the concrete in the basement.
From the floor into the basement,
Right,
you have your
right.
meter, and then it goes outside the house.
Got you.
So
Okay.
anything from that meter outside of the house never gets through the meter. So you'll never see any kind of like a high usage because you have a leak on the outside of your meter.
Okay.
What we'll find is that there's a leak, someone has low pressure or something like that. We'll go out and identify whether the leak is on the public portion of the service, which is from the curb stop to the main, or if it's from the curb stop to the meter. We
Right.
can identify that. And then if it's on the inside, what we call an inside service leak, so it's the property owner's responsibility because it's on private property, we'll notify them that you need to have a plumber come out and take a look and find the leak where it is. But that leak would never show up in your billing because it never makes it to the meter.
Got you. So one of the things we heard about when we was doing those workshops, and I don't know if this is the new technology you were speaking of, these new meters, and the complaint that the few people had at the time was, prior to the new meter, their bill was like $40 a quarter. The new meter came in, it was like $250,
Yes.
because it appears to catch everything.
So
Is this the same technology you're referring to?
So meters, just like everything else, like a car or anything like that, over time it wears.
now? Right.
The meter that spins slower, you can think of it as, how efficient your car is the first day you drive it off the lot. And as it gets older, 100,000 miles, 200,000 miles, 300 if you're lucky, there's a little different wear and tear on the engine. Things don't run as efficiently and smooth. So we have a program where we, swap out old meters for new meters to capture the actual consumption
Right.
that's occurring in the system. So if you get a new meter installed and all of a sudden you get a spike in your bill, chances are the old meter wasn't reading and capturing
Right.
everything.
Right.
So
That's the tough part. Just one more, at least for now, Counselor. So, I saw, obviously, education. I learned that education about this is very useful. And I saw the water finance resource. But, and this, again, may be just a matter of circumstance. But obviously, you have some people who, because of income, and I often speak about seniors who are on fixed income, who may not have, the money or even the ability to acquire finance for home improvement. And so their stuff deteriorates, and then they get a $500, $1,000 bill. And even in terms of water finance resource, they probably wouldn't be able to get financing, depending, because they probably would have gotten it before. And again, I don't think that's a matter of fault on either side. It's a circumstance, but that's probably a lot more normal or regular than many of us know. And so I wonder, I'm not looking for an answer now, but I'm wondering, like, what could we think of or come up with for those kind of scenarios? When you have people who, it's hard to tell somebody who lived in a house for 40 years, well, just move in an apartment, right? That's hard to do.
So do you mean seniors that have a leak or seniors that just can't afford their?
Both. I'm talking about seniors whose houses may have gotten away from them, or even people who are not seniors, but just, they don't make enough money to get any kind of financing.
Yeah.
We understand that some people's circumstances is a matter of choice, but other people, it might be a little beyond their control. And those are the ones you tend to be concerned about.
So, when we a lot of times when we get a high consumption bill, we'll go out and if we can notify the owner, we'll notify them that it's going on. Our guys have, if they see it's a, elderly resident, senior citizen, they will kind of help out, say, hey, let's check your toilet, see if that's leaking, kind of help them through the process because they may not know. And we also offer, if they do have a high bill, we can offer a payment plan to break down that payment so it's not one big lump sum up front. You can break that out over a series of months to make it a little more affordable and manageable.
And I would imagine that might be part of the motivation why other municipalities have introduced programs to address leaks to try and, I'm sure seniors play a role in, or any folks that are on a fixed income.
Councilor Rudd, can I ask, so I know you said you received a bill that was over $1,000. So once you contacted the water department, what was the process? Like, how did you figure out where the leaks were coming from, and did they assist in that? Did you find it out?
Well, basically I went to the downstairs and I showed my bill, and I basically asked, what fires did you put out with my water? And the reaction was very much like, oh, no, this happens all the time. You probably have a leaky toilet. You should check the basement. There might, a lot of people, this happens to a lot of people to their basement toilet because people don't use their basement toilet. Right. So it starts running, and then all of a sudden it's a run for months.
Okay.
And I got the high consumption warning, and I didn't take it I reached out, I actually read it too quickly, and I reached out to the wrong person, and they were all like, oh, everything's good. And then, but then I got the bill, and I was like, whoa, and I reached out, and they were like, oh, we had a leaky toilet, but then we just changed the thing, and it's all set now, but it did run for a little while. And I was like, oh, but that, I imagine, would happen to many people, and the reaction downstairs was like, oh, no, this happens all the time. And they give you 2 toilet dye things, and they're like, go dye your toilets and make sure they're not running. And then, so basically I learned of it, but it was already fixed. So it was just, it ran for a period, I think.
That was your fault.
I don't know if I guess it's my fault, but.
Because I had one too, and I got a $700 bill. And my toilet was running, and they notified me that I had a high consumption.
Yeah.
So because you came in here like ready to beat the world, that was your fault.
For the high bill.
Yeah, those toilets are tricky. They can leak, and they're so quiet. And
well, so this is one of my questions: is you gave us a sheet with the dots with the leak, and when the guy came, who goes to all the high consumption people to explain that why their bill is real, he basically said. We talked about the way the meter works, and he was like, oh, they're like magnetized or something, so in theory there could be like some kind of magnetic force in your street that makes the meter read as open even though it's not, but that really never happens. And then he's like, it basically has a trigger that's like open or not open, and he had this line where he said it's accurate to 1/8 a gallon a minute. And I like flailed my arms and I was like, 1/8 a gallon a minute? What happens if it's like 1/50th of a gallon versus 1/8? Like, are you charging me for 1/8? I didn't understand that one, because when you show these little things, like it seems like if there's this flip or like reader, and like how much threshold does it take to read as open, right? So I could have a gusher, I could just like cut the pipes off to my bathtub and let it flow, or like open it and have it full on, right?
Right.
Or there could be a toilet that's leaking at some rate.
Right.
But like even that, I assume there could be a toilet where it's very badly running and it's basically running the way you're describing, the size of the top, and then there might be others where it's a little slower, but it's leaking.
Right.
So, how accurate are these things?
I mean, the meters
in terms of like really reading what the water is going through.
The meters, it's based on meter size, and different meter sizes have different meter accuracy rates. And I think it's 95% accurate up to like the 1/8 of a gallon. Anything below that, it's not really accurate. So if you're getting a very slow leak, we're probably not even reading it. It's probably not even registering on the meter.
Oh.
So you're actually getting free water.
So below 1/8
so
gallon a minute, it doesn't read it.
It may not read it, or it may be reading it slower than, because there's only so much. You can't be that precise with these types of things. It's just impossible. You only can read out so many decimals.
Real quick, maybe it might be worth it for us to look into sending out those little pieces of paper to everybody. Be like, check see if your toilet's leaking. Simple. Obviously, there's a cost associated with it, but it may be a way to help some people get out of it. My toilet may still be leaking, and I know you guys know better than me. Sometimes it doesn't have to hiss. The tank is still leaking.
Just a little bit.
And your bill can still get away from it.
At least they might be able to go in with the high consumption warning, right? Since that seems like, I don't know how much those little things are. I imagine they're like a penny. Like if you're going to send out the 6,700 high consumption warnings, you could almost put the 2 tabs or whatever, those little things.
Staple it
die,
right
they're die.
Right, little die tabs.
Yeah. As like, hey, as a courtesy. I don't know how much that would cost, but.
I mean, we could, again, part of this is education, getting people to know what to look for, some people just don't know. They expect a big leak running through their house, but it's really not.
Put a basket of them in front of City Hall. Get one.
So you had the cost of the 7 to, I don't know, $10 million to redo the meters. Is that a cost to redo all 35,000 to different new standard, or is that to replace the 5,000 that are?
No, that's to redo everything in the city. That would be more of a Wi-Fi type of connection, or I'm not sure exactly what type of connection they have for technology now, but the reason we have the multiple different read options right now is because we started years ago, and as technology advanced, we went to the new one. But then we were to still have the old ones, the original ones, and as time went on, we slowly swapped them out. Since the touchpad was the current and latest thing 10 years ago, those got installed, and as the next one came in, well, we started installing those, and now we're going back and taking out some of the touchpads, going to the remote read. So it's a long process, and it's not cheap.
So I had a couple questions about, as far as liability, so say someone has a leak somewhere in the line. I'm just curious as to defining where the repair of the leak is always on the property owner, or, as far as the infrastructure, are there areas where it's the city's responsibility, the county's responsibility, or is it always on the property owner?
So it depends on, if you have a leak that's past the meter, it's inside the property somewhere. So that's outside of our purview. We go to the public right away, which is typically the curb stop. The meter is ours, so if the meter breaks, we'll come in and fix it. Like a lot of times in the wintertime, meters will freeze, so we'll come in and fix the meter, get it back up and running. But if it's anything beyond the curb stop on a service line or inside plumbing, that's private property owner responsibility.
Okay, gotcha. And I guess my other question would be, this is kind of an American dilemma on a lot of stages, but I've done some, been in some conversations where we're losing a lot of water because of the age of the infrastructure, and when do we get to replace that infrastructure? It's got to be a massive overhaul of fixing that problem. Would you say $500 million? Yeah, I know you're doing piece by piece, right, but how do we solve that law? I think we're losing a tremendous amount of water, right, because of the age of the infrastructure.
The amount we lose ranges. If you're looking at just city versus the system as a whole, from Skaneateles Lake to the city, there's some typical water loss that occurs between, operation of the system, flushing of the system, fighting fires. That stuff isn't captured on a meter, so we have some built-in water loss. Mm-hmm. But then we have breaks. We can't account for the amount of water we lose there. Leaky joints and stuff like that. To completely overhaul the system is a large endeavor.
Yeah,
and long.
Yeah. Well, how much? I remember we were in discussion with you once before, and you said you put aside a portion of the budget every year to do infrastructure overhaul, correct?
Yep.
What percentage of overhaul do you reckon you do annually? Yeah, that's I'm assuming as much, but I just want to quantify it somewhat.
To overhaul the system on distribution alone, not treatment or anything else like that. So right now in our capital plan, we set aside maybe $2 million a year to do water main replacement. Typically it's 1.5. That doesn't buy us a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe it buys us a mile of pipe. Maybe.
My question is, obviously, our pipes break a lot, and we see it. But how do we compare to other cities? I mean, other Rust Belt cities, do we break down more often than them? And then how do we compare to the national average? And I know you might not know that, but I think we're here every day and we see them break, and we're like, wow, our pipes must be terrible. But how are they compared to other municipalities?
So we'd have to look at other municipalities of our age. Right. So a lot of stuff in climate. Yeah, so we're a little bit different.
And we're unique.
Yes, I love being unique. Cold and cold. Down south, a lot of the infrastructure is new, so they don't have these problems. The Northeast, where the older communities are, I think, Buffalo is in the same boat as we are, and probably same as Pittsburgh and all that.
Can I ask a different type of question? I know that when you want to change out my water thing, I received a threatening correspondence that basically told me you were going to turn off my water. I hope we don't still do that.
We don't turn off water.
I know you don't, but you threatened to turn off my water.
Shut off notice.
Shut off notice?
My bill was paid,
okay,
but I work like 100 hours a week, and because you couldn't get in my house to change the meter, you were going to shut down my water.
I don't know what the letter was referring to, if there was like to change the meter out? Or
yeah, to change it out, and you couldn't get in, so you threatened to shut it off. So right. Do you still do that?
I think we do still send out those letters. I don't know the exact language in those letters.
Because I think that's horrible. I think that's awful.
There's a lot of times people will get those letters and completely ignore them and avoid them. And if there's a issue with their meter or it's leaking and the problem isn't fixed, there could be a liability of we didn't fix our meter. Like if the meter's leaking itself and we can't get in to fix it, I think we could be liable for any damage inside the house.
Okay, well mine wasn't leaking, my bill was paid, you just want to change out my box, so you threatened me.
I will have that conversation and look at those letters more
Yeah, we
closely.
can take a look at the language in the letters.
But a lot of times we get those letters out for leaking meters and stuff like that. But we'll take a look at it.
Just to talk a little bit more about notification, because if I could have a $300 bill instead of a $1,000 bill for a month and then go fix it right away, that would be better, and I think most people would agree that. And I understand the challenge of getting everyone to opt in, because you have people like the president here who don't want you to come in, don't want you to upgrade the thing. Who work all day or whatever aren't able to let you in. But for people who have the newer thing or want to opt into something, it seems, are there options where you already have these multiple different things within the system, but it seems like you could have people opt into, you get a new meter that you pay over the next 2 years for whatever that cost is. If it's $200, I don't know what the number.
Like a service to be monitoring your bill?
Yeah, or where we have some kind of system where I can opt, or maybe, and if you opt out of communication, so you no longer get postage, right? Like you opt into some kind of electronic system where there's no longer, so you get savings on that front, that people could be able to then get like monthly billing, or even kind of like you described the private app, that I could have an app and I could install a tool further along my water line to monitor it myself. But it seems like we could almost have an option for people who wanted that type of thing, and then it would connect to billing and they could get all, and it's almost like the ATM, right? The ATM, right. At some point people didn't use it, they went, and then they gave the option to people and people started to use it and it became easier and it worked, and then everybody started using it. and then they made it impossible for you to get to a teller. But the water department could do something similar, right, where it's like, here is the ideal environment where early adopters are going to join, and then people are going to hear it worked out well, and other people will join. And then maybe a few people hang out and don't join because they don't want to. But then at least you've converted most of the system, right? Like if I could do $2, I don't know, whatever, like some charge to get the new thing,
Right.
to then have it tell my phone whenever, to send me like an immediate warning whenever there was high usage or anything.
Yeah, so we'd have to look at what the cost of developing that type of program is, and that would definitely involve software and the ability to log into an account, through a web browser or something to that effect. So that would be upgrades to the system, be it meters, be it replacing the AS400 in our billing software, creating a web page where you can log into your account, secure access and all that. What that cost would be, I don't know. We haven't looked at that. And then how do we share that cost over the system as a whole? I mean, if we develop this program and 5 people opt in, are those 5 people responsible for paying for the whole cost of the system, or do we spread it out over the whole district?
And I think I don't think our plan going forward is just the status quo. I mean, Joe is looking at how can we change our billing software? How can we upgrade our water billing software? And obviously the FRB report mentioned that we should be exploring partnerships with other water utilities like Aqua. And so, those conversations are underway to see if there's a way that we can leverage what other municipalities and other utility providers are doing that perhaps could benefit us. So I don't want the takeaway to be, this is hard and it's just going to continue to be hard and we don't have any plans to fix it. I mean, there are conversations underway. I hope, a few years from now, we've moved off the AS400 into a billing system that's more responsive, more easily accessible, and that we're using software that's more up to date.
I mean, that's one of the things that we probably see in our capital plan coming up in this next budget season is we put in a line item for updated billing software to write an RFP to go out and see what options are out there and how it would impact us with our meter reading, and also tie into our CMMS program that we're going to be going live with probably by February of next year.
How I don't know, Frank Cleve, I see you sitting in the back. I'm not sure if there's you or anybody else would want to say this, but there's all the changes with regard to finance and payments and how we make payments and having people pay in one place or having finance consolidated into one spot and all of that. So does water fall into those discussions, and are there ways that we can incorporate water? I know I just sprung it on you, but...
No, we're certainly having those conversations, Counselor, but water would probably, because of the complexity of water and the specialty of it, it's probably going to be the last thing that we'll consolidate, but we certainly are looking, I mean, payments are already accepted for water at the central payment office, but combining that anymore with the central payment office is probably the last thing that we'll take a look at.
When somebody says last, that really sounds...
Well, when by last, I don't mean years away. I certainly, it's just we're working on the low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
Let me ask this question, because the water bills are done quarterly, right?
Correct.
So, because I know when I had my leak, so it's not like you're looking at our consumption every day.
No.
It's done on a quarterly basis, so you're not going to be able to tell if I had a leak until you get to that quarter, correct?
Right. And the meters, as Diane was mentioning earlier, only capture the last 35 days of data. So the last month, if you had a leak, we'd be able to see it, but in the prior 2 months, you couldn't. It would just show you got high consumption.
Okay.
Kind of getting away with one. So they're kind of getting away with one if it can't track the previous 2 months, huh?
No, but they tracked it, right? Cumulatively, it tracks. It just doesn't show you day by day.
You'll see it, but you won't be able to say.
Charge you for the first 2 mons. It's just that they might not be able to say here was the use by day.
It wasn't on the 17th of this month.
Right. I have a bit of a, maybe in some way relative, but not the same topic. I don't know if you can answer it, Commissioner, or maybe Madam Director over here.
Just Corey.
Can we just say the madam?
Slightly off topic, and maybe we need to have a discussion or committee meeting on the right-of-way issue. I thought about it when you mentioned the piping under the ground outside the yard, and I'm pretty sure you get bombarded, I know I do, at times with calls of people who can't figure out if the clogging sewage is their fault, or their problem to deal with, or the city problem to deal with. And because one person's right-of-way might actually be at the sidewalk and the other one may be an inch off of their porch, you know, people don't even understand. It's kind of confusing, so I don't know, I think that'll be a worthwhile discussion.
Yeah, I mean, sewers would fall under DPW, and I'm sure Jeremy and Dave DeSocio, our superintendent of sewers, would be happy to have that conversation to talk about. You know, and one of the OKRs that we've been tracking is how often we're returning to places to clear their sewers, to see, is this happening frequently? Is it more concentrated where we're going? I mean, so we've been trying to track that to see, are there problems popping up that that this can help us identify? But I'm sure Jeremy and Dave would be happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, all the calls usually come on the first freeze. So they'll be coming probably in December or January.
So,
Yeah.
All right, appreciate it.
Yeah.
My 2 points that I'd go back to, you brought up the forgiveness. And for my bill, I don't think I should have been forgiven. Like, I wasn't really looking for it. I wanted to understand it and know it wasn't just an error. But I do think forgiveness, as like you described, well, there are 50 who had more than 1,000, and there's 6,700 who got notified for something. I could assume that maybe like 10 of the 50 who had $1,000 bills might warrant a one-time forgiveness, especially if they're owner-occ, if they're on a fixed income, XYZ. So I feel like maybe we should, and I understand that every penny you don't collect is a penny you don't have to fix the infrastructure that we're already under investing in. So I'm not saying create a massive forgiveness program, but I do think we should probably have some pot of forgiveness money somewhere, or I don't even know how you count it, but I think there should be a vehicle for some people to be forgiven when something genuinely goes wrong, especially considering that we don't notify people monthly.
And I mean, and I think it would be a conversation that I think would be collaborative between the council and the administration, so we can find a balance between forgiveness while not having such a great impact on the infrastructure that we want to be investing in. But, and, you know, I think between the administration and the council, we can look at what other municipalities do, because a lot of municipalities structure it differently, where the bill needs to, you know, meet a particular threshold, whether it's, you know, 2 times what it normally is, or, you know, rather than a dollar amount, which wouldn't necessarily make sense because everybody uses different amounts of water. You know, is it automatic? Is there a committee that's assigned to review those? How much of it is forgiven? Do you limit the type of properties that can apply for forgiveness? So different municipalities have a bunch of different ways that it's structured. So I think if the council is interested in that, I think we'd be looking for it to be kind of a conversation so that we can agree on what that program would look like.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that if I could. You know, I'm always kind of harping on concerns for seniors. You know, and one obvious thing, we'll all be seniors one day. You know, and we would
God
want,
willing.
we
Yeah.
would want, I forbid some unfortunate circumstance causes a change in your condition. You would hope that there was something in place,
Right.
you know, that could help you out. And I think, you know, certainly, you know, obviously there's a difference between, you know, adolescents and teenagers and seniors, but they're still vulnerable populations. There's certain things that, you know, teenagers are not required to do, or they have certain, you know, there's different rules, if you will. I just think some consideration for seniors who are living on fixed income, there needs to be some kind of different structure that makes living, you know, a little bit more bearable.
I mean, and that might be a provision that's part of the forgiveness program, whereas, you know, not only do we have certain criteria for the property, but also for the owner. If the owner meets this criteria, then perhaps a higher threshold is considered in terms of forgiveness as opposed to somebody who's not. I mean, I think there are a million different ways that we could structure a forgiveness program that strikes a balance between compassion and just unfortunate circumstances and investing in our infrastructure, because there is a financial impact, but, I think we can strike a balance there.
You saw me get ready to laugh, but not you. I'm laughing at the council president. You are not no senior.
You're not a senior.
The only other thing I'd throw into that is I would imagine to the extent landlords perceive high water bills to be common, they would become more apt to put it as a tenant responsibility and not pay for it, in which case you could have older tenants who are not owner occupied who are also like experiencing this kind of thing. So the owner occ may be not the best requirement period, but I think it's just like creating a pot of like emergency, oh my gosh, this person really genuinely needs it.
Right.
And it shouldn't be the common, I think it should be kind of hard to get, but I do think there's a threshold for which.
There are
go ahead.
different programs out there that different municipalities have collaborated on. There could be something to the effect of, if you want to donate $1 to the emergency senior water fund, that if the senior can't pay their bill, there's a pot of money set aside strictly for that purpose, with specific criteria that they have to meet.
And likely administered perhaps externally.
Correct.
We could,
Right.
with, I don't know, obviously the go-to is home headquarters or somebody, but it could be a check mark on your bill that says, yes, I'll donate $1 to this fund, and which is administered by a third party to address people that are having problems. I mean, it is something that other municipalities do also.
I'll be the first to take the more tougher approach. Maybe we can appeal to the state again to relieve us from some of them unfunded mandates so we can cover costs here at home.
I don't disagree.
What are you back there? All right, so I'm willing to support that lobby if anybody wants to go.
And the last thing is just, I still think to the extent an option is available for people who are interested in like getting more timely billing, that we should look into it. And we should look into it in the context of smart cities. So whether it's the light sensor reads your water bill, like I don't know how it will all work,
trippy.
but like I kind of picture a drone that just kind of hovers and reads the whole city.
Oh boy.
I don't know, maybe that's like 10 years away instead of 2 years away.
There's I mean,
There's a lot of tinfoil hats we're going to need.
as the smart city, Wi-Fi, it starts to be developed. We are in conversations with our meter provider on what type of meters is the latest and greatest and where they are going with the technology and the market and how it's, how does that impact us and will that work with the system we have or we're putting together? So we are beginning those conversations, but it's a long conversation. It's an expensive conversation too. So that's something, as we get into the details of how it would connect, how it would read, if there's some kind of, middleman software that connects one to the other, we would have to look at that and see the impacts and costs and how that would, play a role in the department's operations.
Because whenever I see Sam Edelstein, I say, what are you doing to save us money or to give us more money? But I think it could also be applied to like the residents, right? So how can we save the people who live here money? And I think this is one of those spaces where it seems weird that it doesn't seem like the water department should want people to be getting $1,000 bills to up your overall money for our infrastructure. So like describing, to the extent we lose that, right? We would if we prevented it, we would lose that revenue.
Right. More, I mean, that's kind of what
that
we're
would be
seeing
a good loss.
As a trend as a whole. There's, as newer fixtures get implemented into houses, they use less water, more reuse, less use of water. So, our budget is based on consumption. So as consumption goes down because people are being more conservative, there's less water being used. The people aren't, just wasting stuff, aren't filling their pools every other day or watering their lawns every day. That revenue decreases. That impacts us operationally, obviously, but it's not that we're going to tell everyone just open your faucets, let it run wild.
Or having fewer people
right.
also makes it so there's less water.
Water conservation is great, but not when your revenue is based on consumption.
When 95% of your revenue is based on water consumption.
Right.
Just the last I had noted here, you mentioned the tiered pricing. So what is the tier, and it could be even as simple as, is the first gallon of water the most expensive, or is the last? Like, how does that?
So it's based on the water rate. So your first 1,300 cubic foot is your base rate of $40 and 19 cents, and then every cubic foot use after that is up to 30,000 cubic feet is another cost, and then after that there's another cost associated with the additional 30,000 cubic feet, and then 60,000 cubic feet.
Okay, on that one,
The way that it's structured, our higher users are paying less than our, which might be a conversation of looking at how we structure
that's
water rates.
right. So that's one of the conversations we had with our water rate study, is that the term escapes me at the moment, but when the system was kind of developed, there was a lot of industry here, a lot of high users, high consumption. So it made sense to, as consumption, you were using a lot of water to get you in here to provide jobs and provide economic growth. Your bill went down based on the more you use. We don't have those big industrial and commercial consumers anymore. So we looked at almost reversing that trend, and if you're a higher user, maybe you get billed a little more. That's one of the options we need to look at, based on these bigger users. If they aren't contributing to the system equitably, how do we do that?
Like hospitals and universities.
Yes.
well, if we ever did change that, I would say don't double knock out the people who have an error.
Right.
Like the not error, but like have a oops, right? Like I think the oops you should probably be like, oh well, we'll at least adjust you down to the rate that assumes.
I mean, and that's where a forgiveness program could come in, because some of the municipalities have structured it so that you'd have to demonstrate that the leak or whatever it is has been repaired, that they're, to avoid people having it forgiven and then, I never fixed it and I have the same bill the next quarter.
Do we have to do quarterly bills? I know we've always done it that way, but is there something that says it has to be quarterly?
I don't think there's anything in stone. I think I refer to Diane on that. I think it's just the fact of
It's like the capacity, right?
Quarterly makes it easier to pay.
More than
it's just only what we're able to do at this point. We would need additional staff, we'd have additional postage, looking at about $200,000 in additional postage to send out monthly bills and printing, and so.
Okay, just a question.
I think I don't know of any law that says we do quarterly. I think it's just.
I prefer it stay quarterly.
Pardon?
I prefer it stay
Councilor
quarterly.
Bay likes the quarter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like he was just saying, I don't want no annual bill. That's too big.
Right.
And I don't want another monthly bill. So it makes it easier for some people to budget, especially people who may have, not a large income.
Right.
They need that spread out.
I don't own a home, so I just ask questions.
Well, and hopefully
Now you ain't paying a water bill no more. You don't cause all these problems.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm messing with the quarterly bill.